Yaka, who won the Pulitzer Prize recently. Brother wins the award, and there's no coverage.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's
like
no...
they ignored it.
Yeah, right. It's like, okay, you won the award. What happens is that over the last several years, we really have focused on women's achievements. So if a woman comes along and wins the award, you know, we're really, you know, happy about that woman receiving it. Also, there's a lot of women publications.
But why does it have to be either or? I mean, why can't it be...
Well, I think what you're dealing with, especially in terms of African American culture, is the fact that we are still not the dominant culture.
But isn't there space at the top for a black man and a black woman?
We could go back and we could look historically at African American writing in this country, and we will see at given points only one voice. Okay, so for example, you have Dunbar, that's it. You know what I'm saying? You know, you come through, okay, it's like, okay, you have Baldwin. You know, maybe it's Richard Wright Elder, but then it's Baldwin, you know. We went through a period like right before, it was Ishmael Reed. Everybody was talking about Ishmael Reed. Everybody was talking about Toni Morrison, you know, and it seems that at any given time, like the year before was Terry McMillan.
Yeah.
You know,
she was riding the wave then.
Right?
You know, she riding.
Terry was out there. Then everybody was talking about Rita Dove because she became the poet laureate. Everybody was talking about Maya Angelou because she gave a poem at the inauguration.
Right, that's true.
And you see everybody like, you know, looking for this one person to hold up there. At the same time, I tell people we're at a period of time in which is, to me, it's even surpasses the Harlem Renaissance in terms of the number of well-known, excellent writers, whether it's short stories, poetry, plays. I mean, the talent out there is unbelievable.
Langston Hughes was a phenomenal writer. Since you mentioned the Harlem Renaissance, Hughes is one of my favorite. I love the Tales of Simple.
Well, you know, simple and
it's so real though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like the average Joe six pack. I call him.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. He captures. It's not like the essence of the black experience, and uses simple as a mouthpiece to speak to the experience.
So you know, Langston always, you put Langston in a body of like race men. You know, I think once you read like Langston's life, The Big C, you know, I wonder as I wonder, what you find is that here is a man who loved black people. Now, if you want to analyze him, somebody will say, well, you know,
he wasn't black enough.
Well, not only that, you can see some real interesting things in Langston's, growing up, and that was that his father, hated black people, and
he hated himself,
right, and left the country, went to Mexico, and you get a sense of like Langston dealing with his father. If his father can't stand black people, I'm gonna love him. and so you have that on one level, but at the same time, and Langston's a very beautiful person who really, when he comes to Harlem, or when he takes his travels and goes overseas, whether it's to Africa or wherever, is a person who really was able, through poetry, through plays, through his own biography, really capture that experience in terms of what it means to be black and to be happy in black, And
he wasn't bitter.
It wasn't bitter, even though within Langston's, I think one of the major contributions he makes to African American literature is really elevating the blues, to be appreciated as poetry, to be highlighted in terms of importance in terms of African American culture, and some of the experiments that Langston did in terms of poetry and blues, poetry and jazz, shows Langston as an experimental writer. We sometimes think of Langston as just a black writer, but he's also an experimental writer using these different art forms.
So Langston wasn't the only major writer. Well, he may have been one of the major writers during the Harlem Renaissance, but of course there were others.
Oh, sure. I think that when you look at, especially in this era, one writer that has resurfaced, thanks to people like Alice Walker and Robert Hemingway, Zora Neale Hurston, then also a person who's still alive, Zora Neale Hurston's friend, Mae Miller, who I think is 94 years old, the daughter of Kelly Miller. Then also you have key people like Claude McKay, coming from the West Indies. You have Countee Cullen,
beautiful
who, if you talk about traditional writers, I think it's very good to look at Countee Cullen and Langston Hughes and the difference in style.
Then there was people like Gene Toomer.
Gene Toomer, and then there's people who say they came late to the Harlem Renaissance, people like Sterling Brown, who definitely did not associate himself with that period.
Jessie Fawcett.
Jessie Fawcett, I'm glad you mentioned her name, because, we talk a lot about the Harlem Renaissance, and if you had a find a person who served as like a midwife, it would probably be Jessie Fawcett, working, with Du Bois at the Crisis magazine, being the key person to sponsor some of those little literary contests.
Now, we speak on Langston, but Langston, it's funny, all kinds of things that people have to do as a writer, as a poet, sometimes, because Langston did all kinds of stuff. I'm sure many of them.
Sure.
Bust dishes and
right.
He met his benefactor.
Well, what happened. I recall at that time it was a Wardman Hotel. He was a little busboy up there, and the well-known writer at that time, Vachel Lindsay, happened to be there.
Yes.
And now this shows you something about Langston. Langston slid some poems up under that plate, and that evening, Vachel Lindsay read some of the poems that had been given to him by Langston, and there's this famous picture of Langston, in his
carrying the tray,
the busboy poet, and it had a lot to do. And I tell people that sometimes being in the right place at the right time has a lot to do in terms of advancing your career. The same way I think that people like Jessie Fawcett and Langston has talked about this was key in terms of really liking Langston's work, and consequently publishing his poetry in the Crisis magazine. And we know, looking back, that the Crisis and Opportunity magazine, put out by the Urban League at that time, were the two key publications, reaching African American people.
Yeah, definitely the Crisis.